So today's video is going to be a little different. If you've been a part of the Champions Online community for a while, you've probably heard the news. Kaizerin, the main developer behind the game, has been laid off. Their time working on the game has certainly been a journey, one with its ups and downs, but there's no denying the impact they've had on shaping Champions into what it is today. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty about what comes next. We don't know if new developers are stepping in, or if the game's future is in jeopardy. But what I do know is that Champions is a very passionate community that cares deeply about its future. So, I want to take a moment to address whoever may be taking over the development, or whoever's listening, and share some of my thoughts on what could be done to improve the game. Champions Online has been around for well over a decade, and in that time, it's built a dedicated player base that keeps coming back because of its unique customization and fast-paced combat. But it's no secret that the game has had its struggles. Content droughts, balancing issues, and a lack of communication from the developers have all been ongoing concerns. With this transition, there's an opportunity to breathe new life into the game, and I want to highlight some areas where even small changes could make a big difference. Champions really shines when it comes to customization, giving players the freedom to design their ideal superhero. You can tweak every detail of your character's appearance, from costume to accessories, ensuring that no two heroes look alike. The game goes even further with the specialization system, letting you choose a path that enhances your hero's powers and abilities based on how you want to play. Whether you prefer dealing heavy damage, tanking hits, or providing support, this system gives you the flexibility to make your character fit your style. On top of that, the mod slotting system lets you adjust your hero stats, offering even more control over how they perform in combat. These features combine to create a highly personalized experience that puts you directly in charge of your character's journey. However, despite all this customization, Champions Online faces a major issue: a lack of content. Simply put, there just isn't enough to keep players engaged over the long term. While the game has a strong foundation, the absence of fresh missions, events, and meaningful endgame content eventually leaves even the most dedicated players with little to do. To make matters worse, the existing content often doesn't feel rewarding enough to justify constant grinding. Whether it's revamping older missions with better incentives, introducing entirely new content, or adding new power sets to expand build variety, addressing this content gap should be a top priority for anyone continuing development. When it comes to endgame content in Champions Online, the core progression revolves around earning silver and gold champions recognition, the primary currencies used to purchase endgame gear sets. But the way players can earn these currencies are quite limited, leading to a repetitive and often stale gameplay loop. Endgame primarily consists of two activities: Cosmics and Lairs. Cosmics are large-scale, open-world missions featuring powerful world bosses that require coordinated groups to defeat. These battles are a staple of the community, but they're also time-gated. You can only earn rewards from up to 3 Cosmics before having to wait for the daily reset. The other main source of endgame rewards comes from Thrakiel's Temple and Telios Ascendant, the game's 2 high-level lairs. These instance dungeons offer structured group challenges and another way to earn currency. But just like Cosmics, they come with restrictions. Players can only earn rewards from 2 runs of each lair every 12 hours, adding another layer of time gating to endgame progression. Beyond these activities, there's one more high-level encounter: the Eidolon of Destruction. This fight requires players to complete 3 open missions within the Cliffothic War Zone in quick succession before Eidolon can be challenged. Since this condition relies on multiple groups coordinating across the zone, it usually takes a full instance of players working together to make this happen. While this battle does add an extra challenge, it still falls into the same limited rotation of gated content. With so few options, endgame quickly starts to feel repetitive. Veteran players often find themselves cycling through the same encounters with little variety, and once the daily or bi-daily limits are reached, there's not much reason to keep playing outside of personal enjoyment or helping others. Expanding the endgame with new activities or adjusting reward structures would go a long way towards making the experience feel less restrictive and more engaging. Perhaps the biggest issue with endgame content, though, is how little the game actually prepares you for it. There's a sharp divide between those who know what they're doing and those who don't, often leading to frustration on both sides. The game does little to teach mechanics, roles, or expectations, leaving new players to learn through trial and error, or worse, being excluded from groups entirely. Implementing better tutorials or practice scenarios could help bridge this gap and create a more welcoming and skilled player base. The new player experience also has some major hurdles that can make it difficult to get fully invested. One of the first things players do is choose an archetype, which determines their abilities and playstyle. At first, it seems like there are plenty of options, but new players will quickly notice that most archetypes are locked behind a paywall. While a few can be earned through in-game events, the majority of them must be purchased. Even among the available options, balance is a major issue. Some archetypes, both free and paid, are poorly optimized or outright broken, making them frustrating to play. For newcomers who don't yet understand the game's mechanics, picking the wrong archetype can lead to a rough start. More ways to unlock archetypes through gameplay, and adjustments to underperforming ones would make the experience far more welcoming. Alongside archetypes, there's also freeform, the most flexible way to play. Unlike archetypes, freeform lets you mix and match powers however you want, allowing for deep customization and creativity. It is widely considered the best way to experience champions online, but it's locked entirely behind a paywall. Since freeform is such a core part of what makes the game special, giving new players a limited trial or a way to earn freeform slots in-game would make a huge difference. Beyond content and customization, Champions Online could use several quality of life improvements to make the game smoother and more enjoyable. One big issue is the lack of clear tracking for layer and cosmic cooldowns. Players have no easy way to check when they can reattempt these activities without relying on external timers or guesswork. Adding an in-game cooldown tracker could remove this frustration and help players plan their sessions more effectively. Another much needed feature is an in-game DPS meter. Right now, there's no reliable way for players to measure their performance, making it difficult to refine builds or improve efficiency in tougher encounters. A built-in DPS tracker would help individuals fine-tune their characters while also encouraging a deeper understanding of team dynamics and group content. There's also a problem with the game's unofficial crowd control role. 2 of the 3 major cosmic fights require a dedicated CC player, but outside of those encounters, the role is almost useless. This makes it feel like a wasted character slot, since CC players rarely get to use their abilities elsewhere. The game could either expand the need for CC across more content, or rework these fights so they're less dependent on it. Another way to improve the game would be giving high-level players more reasons to join low-level missions. Right now, leveling can feel lonely because fewer people are running early game content. A system that rewards veterans for sidekicking down and helping with lower level missions would give them more to do, while also making the leveling experience more social. On top of that, difficulty settings should do more than just make enemies stronger. Ideally, they should scale enemy spawns based on team size, making group play feel more engaging. And they should offer better rewards to make the extra challenge feel worthwhile. Right now, higher difficulties don't provide any real benefit, so there's little reasons to use them. Lastly, the way Champions Online forces DPS players into either a melee or ranged role creates unnecessary restrictions. These roles boost one type of damage while severely weakening the other, making hybrid builds, ones that use both melee and ranged attacks, far less effective. This forces players to commit to just one playstyle and limits build creativity. A better approach would be replacing the separate melee and ranged DPS roles with a single unified damage role. Instead of locking players into one category, forms and passives could determine which attacks get boosted, allowing for specialization without punishing hybrid builds. This would make build crafting much more flexible, encouraging diverse and creative playstyles while keeping things balanced. While PvE has seen at least some updates over the years, PvP in Champions Online has been largely abandoned, leaving it in a rough state. One of the biggest problems is accessibility. PvP queues are often completely empty, making it nearly impossible for new players to even experience this side of the game. Without an active player base, matches simply don't happen, which creates a cycle where those interested in PvP have no reason to stick around. On top of that, PvP is heavily gear dependent. The best PvE endgame sets give players a massive advantage, making fights feel one-sided rather than skill-based. Because there's no dedicated PvP gear progression, new or undergeared players are at an extreme disadvantage, further discouraging participation. If PvP exclusive gear were introduced, something that could match PvE endgame gear in strength but earned through PvP activities, it would go a long way towards making the mode more balanced and more appealing. Another major issue is power balance. Some abilities vastly outperform others in PvP, often due to sheer damage output rather than any deeper mechanical interactions. Adjusting these powers for PvP is tricky, and extra care must be taken to ensure that any changes do not negatively impact their use in PvE. If a PvP adjustment results in a buff for PvE, that's fine, but straight up nerfs have historically created unnecessary tension between PvE and PvP players. This kind of conflict has only further divided the community, making it even harder to build support for PvP improvements. That's why a careful, targeted approach to PvP balance is crucial. Small, thoughtful adjustments over time without hurting PvE players in the process could go a long way towards making PvP more viable. I'd even be willing to personally work with developers to share feedback and help refine these changes if it meant seeing PvP become a thriving part of the game again. Revitalizing PvP doesn't have to happen overnight, but small steps like making meaningful rewards available in PvP queues and gradually adjusting balance could breathe life back into this long-neglected aspect of Champions Online. Another major issue in PvP is sustain. Right now, certain top-tier builds can achieve such high levels of sustain that they become nearly unkillable, even against veteran players running high-damage setups. This creates a frustrating imbalance where even the most optimized damage builds struggle to break through the sheer survivability of these sustain-heavy characters. This happens due to a combination of resistance stacking, damage mitigation through debuffs, and powerful healing sources that aren't affected by anti-healing mechanics like trauma or pestilence. Because of this, fights can drag on indefinitely, making PvP less about skillful play and more about endurance. To fix this, adjustments need to be made to how players take damage and heal when fighting other players. A possible solution would be implementing a stacking degradation system for healing and damage resistance in prolonged 1v1 fights. This would prevent duels from turning into endless stalemates while still allowing sustained focused builds to function. Additionally, key healing sources like Sentinel Mastery and Illumination should be affected by healing debuffs, ensuring that counterplay options actually work as intended. Addressing sustain in PvP wouldn't just make fights more engaging, it would also create a healthier competitive environment where skill and strategy take priority over sheer survivability. Another frustrating issue in both PvP and PvE is knock RNG. Right now, a player can be knocked up to 3 times in a row, leaving them completely helpless. While this might be fun for the attacker, it's an incredibly frustrating experience for the defender since there's literally no counterplay. You're left unable to act, completely at the mercy of your opponent or enemies. To make matters worse, knock resistance doesn't mitigate knocks as effectively as it should. Even when stacking knock resistance, players can still get launched repeatedly, making it feel like investing in resistance does little to actually prevent the issue. The way knock resistance scales against incoming knocks needs to be adjusted so that it provides more reliable protection, giving players a better chance to stand their ground. On top of that, knock mechanics completely ignore blocking. If a player is knocked while blocking, not only do they still get launched, but they also take the full damage from the attack as if they weren't blocking at all. This completely undermines the purpose of blocking as a defensive tool and makes certain encounters feel unfairly punishing. Blocking should provide better protection against knock effects, either by significantly reducing knock strength or outright preventing knock attacks from dealing full damage. Additionally, A player should gain knock immunity for at least 12 seconds after being knocked once, rather than after 3 knocks. This would prevent frustrating chains of back-to-back knocks while still allowing knock-based abilities to remain viable. Fixing knock RNG wouldn't just improve PvP, it would also make PvE feel much smoother, ensuring that players aren't unfairly locked out of combat due to unavoidable knock spam. At its core, Champions Online has so much untapped potential. The game's deep customization, unique power system, and fast-paced combat still stand out in the MMO space, even after all these years. But without meaningful updates, it feels like it's just treading water. If it were given the attention it deserves, with proper content updates, system improvements, and quality of life fixes, it could easily become the superhero MMO fans have always wanted. Whether that happens or not is up to the developers, but one thing's for sure, the foundation is there. All it needs is the right support to truly shine.